First of all, I always like to start these conversations off, not with how I would want to introduce you, but how you would like to introduce yourself. So however you feel comfortable. We're a large small group or a small large group, however, but we're friendly.
Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna read. Well, okay, okay. I accidentally deleted my bio, but we're good now. So, I'm just gonna share something I wrote. I'm not used to writing a bio, but I'm gonna try it out today. So, I've been a community organizer with Kalikasan Solidarity Organization for 2 years. Justice work, seeing the kingdom of heaven here on earth, and building community have been guiding passions throughout my life. Growing up in the Bible Belt and wanting to take seriously the biblical call to seek justice, I began looking for ways to get involved in alleviating the suffering of the poor and oppressed. I lived in intentional communities and supported with initiatives around racial justice, foster care, asylum seekers, and the houseless community in Memphis, Tennessee, and eventually came to understand that while offering services and meeting immediate needs is important, it doesn't fully address the root causes of people's suffering, and that in order to do that, we must organize and come together to fight against this exploitation. And this is what led me to the work that I do now of fighting to uproot the root causes of oppression. So that's my bio.
All right, thank you. So you represent Kalikasan. Did I say that right?
Kalikasan.
Kalikasan Solidarity Org. Could you tell us a little bit more about your organization?
Yeah, so we're a grassroots organization of non-Filipinos in solidarity with the Filipino people. We specifically focus on environmental justice work.
So that's interesting, given Walter was talking about the trees, and that's
Yeah, definitely close to our hearts.
Yeah. What does the name mean?
It means nature. It's like the Tagalog word for nature or earth.
Okay, great. And how is Kalikasan connected to the Philippines?
Yeah, so one of the big ways that we're connected is through a coalition called the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, which is, like the name says, an international coalition of all kinds of organizations, churches, unions that really take up the fight of the Filipino people. And so they have chapters all over the world, and then we have connections with people in the Philippines. So that's how we get info about what's happening and what's needed and how we can be involved. And then through like going on trips to the Philippines and meeting people there, we strengthen those people-to-people ties and get more integrated into that international solidarity work on a personal level too.
Great. So you mentioned an organization that we also happen to be connected to through our conference, the Central Pacific Conference of the United Church of Christ. Most of the time we call it iChirp because what you said is a mouthful.
It is.
And we get a little, I get a little lazy with it. But if you've heard us talk about iChirp, that's what we're talking about. And I'm wearing a shirt that was produced, I think, by iChirp. Yeah. And it says what it says on the reader board. So if you're wondering, like, what on earth is on the reader board? I can't take credit for it. It says, from Palestine to the Philippines, stop the U.S. war machine. And believe it or not, we agreed to help support efforts for peace, restorative justice in the Philippines and in Palestine before October 7th last year. So that was an initiative that we voted on in September. So some of us may be wondering, why should we advocate for peace in the Philippines? You know, what's different about what's happening over there? Also, you know, if you're a Navy brat or a military brat like I am, maybe we grew up with an understanding that everything's copacetic over there. You know, everything's great. Can you help enlighten us?
Yeah, that's definitely the image they want to portray.
Who's they?
The state and even wealthier Filipinos who are there and want to say, hey, come, like, tourism is great, the beaches are nice, like, just ignore who is being exploited through these things that you're trying to enjoy. Like, when I was there last year, you know, I was like, in the capital city in Manila, I was like, man, this kind of looks like just a regular city. There's these malls, like, but then you go around the corner and there's just people who live on the streets, similar to here. And so to really understand the current conditions, you have to understand the scope of colonization in the Philippines. So one thing that we talk about a lot is the Philippines is very rich, but the people are very poor. So the Philippines itself has amazing land, amazing mineral resources. The water is beautiful. There's fish. There's everything you could need. But because it's not the people who are in charge of how those resources get used and distributed, the foreign capitalists, the government, they're really the ones who are in charge. And so people are toiling. Most people in the Philippines live in the countryside and are peasants, and so they're working the land. But then owe much of what they harvest to landlords, and are not able to actually, like, use the rice that they produce to feed their families. And so, and this goes back to the 1500s when the Philippines was colonized by Spain, and there was a period of Spanish colonization, and then in the late 1800s is when the U.S. colonization really started. So the U.S. kind of swooped in right when the Filipino people were on the cusp of victory against their Spanish colonizers, and so for the past over 100 years, the U.S. has had really firm control over the Philippines, and they were, like, formally granted independence in the 1940s. But before that, there were these agreements made that essentially, in practice, really the U.S., they're still a colony of the U.S., so we call it like a semi-colony or a neo-colony. And so we see these, like, deep ties between the ruling classes of the U.S. and the Philippines, and that's part of our motivation for, like, we as the people, we know that our government is exploiting the Filipino people in these particular ways, so we need to take up responsibility to fight alongside the Filipino people in particular, and really see our struggles as connected and our histories as connected as well.
Thank you. That's very. That was a lot of information at one time.
The crash course.
Yeah, no, I love it though. It's great. Yeah. So some clarifying questions from me, just based on what you said. You used the term foreign capitalist. I think it would be helpful for us to know what that means. Does that mean businesses from other countries outside of the Philippines? Is that, like, the primary identifier of that?
Yeah. So for example, so I mean, there's so many examples of companies that are like US based, so like Tesla, Boeing, all these different companies have um, like pretty open access. There's very open access to trade and to foreign companies coming in and like taking over whole industries. The current president, yeah, he has videos talking about like he'll be at Wall Street and he'll be like, I just passed this thing to make it even easier for you guys to come here. Like, you don't even have to worry about like
By here you mean the
regulation.
Philippines?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so he's like really selling out his country, and of course, totally in collusion with the U.S. And so, yeah, so Tesla's there doing these mining projects that are destroying the land. And it's really encouraged by the government because they want those profits. And so, yeah, so it's really foreign corporations that have such a stronghold there.
Yeah.
Does that answer that?
Yeah. Yes.
It's complicated.
Well, and if folks have questions as we go along, we'll have some time at the end for those, okay? So maybe get a pen and paper, write it down if you're worried about losing it. Write on your hands if you want, I don't know. Don't write on your neighbor's hands, though. So that does kind of shed some light on the focus that Kalikasan takes environmentally.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the ways that this exploitation is showing up is through over harvesting the land. It's through like mineral, what's it called? Mining, that's what it's called. all of that stuff that does tremendous damage to where people are living in the Philippines. But are there other elements of that that maybe aren't immediately clear to us? Like, if we have a problem with people harvesting trees in a specific area, we're worried about the spotted owl, we'll get a good number of us together and we'll protest, and like that's a practice we're pretty familiar with over here. Don't they just do that over there?
Well, yes, and yeah, so 75% of the population in the Philippines is peasants, so people who rely on the land for just their lives, for
Now that's
daily.
the technical definition for peasant?
That's the technical, yes, it's
Okay.
not like a derogatory thing. I wondered that too. I was like, why are we using this term? But yes, that is like the chosen term. Like yes, it's okay to use it.
Yeah.
Yes, so landless peasants, they rely on the land, and so any natural disaster, which we know is largely caused by these mining projects and other environmental degradation projects, the people are like deeply affected by it. And so there is, from day one of colonization all the way through to today, there's a long history of resistance through many ways. And so there are really powerful mass movements that are out there, like no to mining projects, like barricading the entrances to mining sites. So there's really action like that. But that's not enough. Like the people have determined like this is not enough to sway the government to just cut ties with these foreign companies. And so many people, particularly peasants in the countryside, have taken up arms to fight back and to defend their communities because heightened militarization, like we're hearing stories every week of communities having military personnel coming in. And so for many of these peasants, they view their only option, it's like resist through armed struggle or be killed through military force. And so, yeah, so that's going on. And yeah, that's all I'll say for now. But no, it's
Like,
not.
no, that's good. That's good context.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine you've got a big company that come into town and they're taking your form of sustenance away from you. You know, you've got brackish, dirty water you can't drink. Like, how long do you put up with that if you feel like your government's not going to do anything? That would be a devastating situation to have to deal with. So, one of the questions that I put down here, I want to make sure that I nail before we're done, is just, what are your principles of solidarity? Like, it's in your name.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that, and how does it show up in the work that you do?
Yeah, so we, international solidarity is the core of everything that we do. And for us, that really looks like that close partnership with people on the ground in the Philippines who are sharing what they need. Like it's I think a contrast from a lot of like charity work, kind of where it's like we're kind of guessing at what people might need. But our work is really rooted in going to people and investigating and saying what are your problems and what are the solutions you identified are going to solve those problems. And so that's really where iChirp came from. That's where all of our solidarity orgs have come from. And so so on an international level, we're looking at solidarity, but we're also looking at what does it mean locally, because there are so many Filipinos who have been forced to migrate from the Philippines because of these conditions, like just dire economic conditions. And so we think about what does solidarity look like on a daily basis with local Filipinos? What does it mean to help them solve their problems and organize? And so it's really working together and seeing seeing how our best interest is in Philippine liberation. For all of us, it's in our best interest for everyone around the world to be free from exploitation, because we know that it's these companies and corporations and the states that are upholding them that are oppressing and exploiting all of us in our jobs and our our economic situations and in every area of our life. So we really see like this isn't just a nice thing to do, but it's really necessary for the future of all of us.
Maria, you're gonna ruffle some feathers.
How so?
No, it's okay. We can sit with, if you do have feathers that are ruffled, like, we can sit with this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Could I share a story? Would that be okay?
Yeah, please.
Okay. I'm checking the time to make sure I don't go over. I never go over anyway. I just be a one-off. So many of you know that I used to live in Japan. So I was over there as a missionary English teacher, and I was there for 3 months before I realized that I was in a very exploitative environment. That's when the leaders of our group sat down me and all the other teachers and gave us a list of people that we could talk to and people we were not allowed to talk to outside of classes. And high on that list were all the church members except for the 3 children of the wealthiest church member, because they didn't want us giving away free English lessons. Um, yeah, I know. I'm like, but on the recruitment papers, you said like we're going to come over and we are going to help provide very affordable, lower than market English lessons, and that's a win-win for everybody. We're going to help these students who are like everywhere from preschool age to like in their 80s. And we're going to help all of these other organizations, like these faith-based organizations we work with. Like, yeah, that's what it says on the tin, but could you like only talk to other English speakers, like native English speakers, and not to any of these other folks? And it felt very isolating. It was very heartbreaking for me and a bunch of other folks. It was my first time encountering what I would call visa fraud, because what they were looking for, like they brought us over under religious visas, but what they were really wanting us there for was to like would qualify under the regular work visa. It's just different requirements. And I had Filipino teachers there who had been there for years and would end up being there for years. So I saved up money so that I could go home. Heartbroken. It took 3 months for me to be able to earn enough money to get a ticket back home.
Once you're there, they kept you there? Is what they were trying to do?
Well, I don't know if they would say they were doing that. What I know is I was in one of the most expensive areas in the entire world, earning very little money because I'm doing this work under a different banner. You know, yeah. Stuff I wouldn't advise today. One of my teachers, Alma, had been there for 7 years. She was a mom. She was a mom of elementary school age kids. And in my first month there, I thought, wow, how selfish of you to be here without your kids. I chose to be here. You chose to be here, obviously. Months 2 and 3, I came to realize a choice to stay when you know you're not going to be able to feed your kids, or a choice to leave so that you could send money home and feed those kids, is no choice at all. She didn't choose it. And it was only since then that I came to learn that so many Filipinos all around the world are in situations just like Alma, including here in this country, earning very, very little, trapped in an exploitative work environment in the hopes of feeding their kids or taking care of their family members back home. So when you're talking about like exploitation, I picture in my mind some of my incredible coworkers. Yeah. Your organization also works to improve the lives of Filipinos here, in addition to those in the Philippines. And I'm just wondering if you can say a bit more about that.
Yeah.
Like if we had Alma here in Portland, how could your organization impact her?
Yeah, so as KSO, we have taken up what's called the Care for Caregivers campaign, and that's really a campaign that came from some of our organizers working in care homes alongside Filipino women who had come here to, yeah, like you're saying, to be able to provide for their families back home, forced over here. But then have been so taken advantage of once they're here, for the fact that many of them don't speak English has really been used to get them to sign on to paperwork that is an exploitative contract. It keeps them from being able to understand their pay stubs. So we're seeing mass amounts of wage theft. We're seeing instances where the person's boss is also their landlord. So if they're trying to advocate for just basic, decent conditions at work, it puts their housing situation at risk. And so this campaign really started to bring together these caregivers and get to understand their stories and to say, like, this is not okay, like, this, you deserve better, like, even if it's like a better situation than you had in the Philippines, like, and you're able to send money back, like, this is not okay, you're being exploited. And so that campaign, we do a lot of healthcare services, because many caregivers are spending so much time serving other people and taking care of other people's health, but their basic needs aren't being met. They're being neglected by both the Philippine state and by the U.S. government, and then locally by bosses. And so we really work to fill in those gaps of basic needs that are not being met otherwise. But then, like we talked about earlier, it's like we know that meeting those needs for, for individuals is not enough to root out these like underlying problems. And so this campaign is really fighting struggles against the people who are responsible for this exploitation, starting with bosses, but also recognizing always that it is the ruling class, the ultimate people in power, who are making this exploitation possible. And so our role as KSO is really to support at every level of the campaign and keep bringing other people in to get involved and to help us meet more caregivers, to help us get the word out, to get resources for them. Sometimes they need childcare or rides to and from doctor's appointments or whatever. And so it's really that practical day to day, and then it's also the planning and the getting ready for these bigger efforts.
All right. You said a key word here, and that is practical. Because we're talking about this huge issue, right? And one that impacts all of us in some way, whether we acknowledge it or not. We're connected to this militarization. Our weapons get sold by ours. I mean, like the US government manufactured weapons get sold all over the world. They get used all over the world. Philippines is one of those places where US weapons that are backed by tax dollars are used by their governments. So but I'm also aware that that's fuzzy. That's a fuzzy connection for a lot of us, right? Like our taxes get used for all sorts of things we don't want them used for. But most of us have encountered care workers. And a lot of us have encountered care workers who are from other areas and are being exploited. So that feels a little bit more tangible. Mm-hmm. Like that's a everyday situation. Mm-hmm. And then you name some ways that people can help with this that are like beyond going to the Philippines and yelling at the president over there. Like childcare. Mm-hmm. And driving people, things like that. And I'm wondering, for the sake of the people in this room and the people who are online, how else could we be involved in this work? How do we get started in being involved as individuals or as an organization, and what does that look like?
Specifically related to the caregivers. So, I gotta go fast.
Nah.
Yeah, specifically the Care for Caregivers campaign.
I think anything with Kalikasan.
Okay.
Kalikasan.
Kalikasan, yes. Yeah. Okay. So one thing is, I would love to talk more about how folks here can get involved in some of those practical things. I know that's something y'all have a lot of practice with, is serving the community. So would love to talk about what it looks like to do childcare or transportation. There's also going to be a documentary currently in the works, should be done next month, about the caregiver struggle. So would love to watch that with you all and really use that as a springboard to get us thinking. Everyone has a different way to contribute based on skills and resources and everything. So would love to continue that conversation. And then another aspect of our work, just a practical thing that we would love to have people involved with even today, is actually an iChurch member locally named Copeland. He's a faith organizer and was trying to go to the Philippines to watch it was like a human rights conference essentially, and he was denied entry into the Philippines on false charges of going to a rally when he was there a couple of years ago, which is not true. And so we're developing a campaign around it to get answers, because they haven't been clear about why he was actually blacklisted. So we have a petition that we're trying to get as many signatures as possible on, that we'll be delivering to representatives of both the U.S. government and the Philippine government. So would love to have folks sign on to that, and then if people are open to making statements about either this situation with Copeland or in support of caregivers, we're really trying to amplify that message to as many people as possible. So yeah.
Thank you. So are you going to stick around after the service?
Yes, definitely.
All right. So people can get your email or the organization's email. They can sign up.
Yeah.
And they can get, do you have any handouts or business cards or anything?
Yeah, we have some brochures for the caregivers campaign that we can share.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Go from there.
All right. Oh, see, the phone call is letting us know we gotta move on. I did say if you had questions, we would make room for them. Do we have one or two questions? Yes, Wendy.
Because I know that the caregivers and also, believe it or not, musicians are the two biggest exports from the Philippines in the United States. What's the potential for them to unionize?
That's a good question. Yeah, a lot of times, so with the caregivers, what we've really seen is that for different reasons, because of like the size of the care homes or like language barriers or even things around like citizenship, there are some barriers to unionization among certain sectors of care workers. You know, some are eligible to maybe join SEIU, but we really focus on those who are not, and maybe would prefer like a more grassroots approach, because you know we've definitely seen limitations to unions, even all in there, but there's definitely you know there's possibility there, but there's also drawbacks and not always the preferred solution.
As far as the bands, some of the best musicians I've ever played with were Philippine musicians.
Yeah.
People who came here just to do that.
Wow.
I mean, they sound exactly like the guy in Journey.
Yeah.
Sounds just like the rhythm for them. So they're amazingly talented too.
Yeah. That's true. The karaoke.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay, and Rita, I think it'll be our last hand, and then we'll move on to the rest of the service, and we can talk afterwards. What's your question? So Rita is talking about the declaration of martial law over in the Philippines, which is on year 50?
52.
Year 52. So the Philippines have been under martial law for 52 years.
Well, and it's not it was like formally lifted in the 80s, and so they're not actively under a formal declaration, but because of the human rights violations, they're talking to people there. They talk about how it really feels like de facto martial law, and so there are definitely still elements of it still present. So that's a lot of what our human rights work is about, and yeah, we would love to keep working with y'all to keep amplifying that message and get the message of freedom amplified and solidarity.
Hey, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.